Hello and welcome to Pathways. I'm Jenny Hartshorn, your host. And as you know, my show is about ordinary people who do extraordinary things. The PennEast Pipeline is planning to dig a 118-mile trench through central New Jersey onto many residents' properties and farms, even for those who have preserved their farms and farmland preservation. This struggle, to me, is a struggle of David and Goliath. PennEast has billions of dollars to push this through. The activists, landholders, only their rights. Or do they? This is a fight for farmers' rights to protect their crops. This is a fight against environmental destruction. This is a fight for water safety. And this is a fight, on occasion, for human lives. Today, I want to introduce another member of the fight, a lawyer from Stark & Stark, who will teach us about the legal rights of the property owners as it pertains to PennEast Pipeline, and what people need to do legally to protect their land and their lives. I'm happy to introduce Tim Duggan. Hello, Tim.
Hello, Jenny. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. I want to start by saying I did a little research and I read a little bit about the pipeline. And in my research, the bold letters on the top of the website were, "We will bring gas to Hunterton to central New Jersey at much lower prices. In fact, we could have saved in 2013 as much as $200 million if we had had a chance to put the pipeline in. Number two, we will bring jobs to this area, the area that's being impacted by the pipeline. And we will be meeting regulations of both environmental and FERC and what the community needs." So my first question is that all true?
Well, I don't think all of it's true. I think part of that is the spin of the pipeline company as they present their case down in Washington to try to get approval for the pipeline. For example, on the environmental, you can follow environmental laws. That doesn't mean that when you clear cut and remove a whole bunch of trees, or you dig under a stream to build your pipeline, that stream's going to come back to the way it was, and those trees are going to come back to the way they were. You have various organizations throughout New Jersey that have spent a substantial amount of money trying to preserve strategic areas to keep it pristine. Now pipelines are going right through those properties. Oftentimes they just dig it up with a big trench and try to replace it.
Well, and that's what I mean. I want to wait till you address each one, but I can't help but saying that's the first thing that I've read about, according to Halt, a group that came on, a woman who came on the show who represents Halt, Jacqueline Evans. And she said that when you go under streams, especially in Hunterton, where those streams are actually the water people are drinking, you hit big chunks of rock. And sometimes there's arsenic that's released out of this rock and can get released into the water table. So how, from a legal standpoint, why are they allowed to pollute the water table?
Because they'll dispute that they're polluting the water table. So they will come in with their experts and say, no, that's not the case. And then the property owners and people opposing it have to produce their own experts to say, no, that's not true. The same thing with wells. If I have a well and it's coming near my well and they have to blast to get through some rock, that could cause problems and also potentially leaching into the well. So as you go through, it's not a simple process where you're just going to dig a little trench and put a pipe in. You're going under waterways, you have things that could be disturbed under the soil, you have wells, you have septic systems, you have pristine farmland and streams that you're not sure if that's going to be replaced to the way it was before. And it's very simple. You could go out and physically look at where pipelines have been put in and get a picture before and after and make your own conclusion. And it's not pretty oftentimes.
So what about jobs? They claim that this is going to bring millions, thousands of jobs. Now, is that to the areas where the destruction is taking place? Or is that jobs back, in Ohio where these people are coming in from?
Well, first of all, those jobs are short term. So if you come in and build the pipeline, once that's done, there are no permanent jobs. So it's short term.
Can they hire everyone who's looking for a job in Hunterton and give them a job?
If they wanted to, they could hire local people and say, we will commit to hiring local people to build this pipeline, local contractors, people looking for work. But they do not do that. They do not commit. So oftentimes they'll be crews in from other areas to bring them in to build a pipeline. So yes, there may be jobs, but that doesn't mean those jobs are for residents of the state of New Jersey or Pennsylvania.
Now, what about the gas prices being lower? They've claimed that by bringing in this gas line, it makes the gas less for the homeowners.
Yeah, I question that.
Is that true? Because I understood that the gas was exported to Europe, so I would think it would be cheaper. Why would that affect, if the gas is being exported to Europe, how does that impact central New Jersey's gas prices?
Well, I don't think PennEast has conceded it's being exported, but I think it's pretty clear based upon the route and where it's connecting up and where it's going.
The port.
It is for export because it's going for the port. And I believe that the industry is somewhat overbuilt right now. So
what does
there's
that mean?
I think there's a lot of pipelines that have been built, and there has been a lot of demand for gas as the oil prices increase. But right now, the industry appears to be overbuilt. I don't know if adding this additional gas is going to do anything to the prices.
Well, I always thought if we have too much oil, that the price of oil went down. Is that not the case?
Yes, and that's what happened.
Too much gas, the gas prices would go down?
Yes, the same thing. It's supply and demand. So, it's not just a matter of the supply and demand. In oil industry, it's a little different because we're dealing with foreign factors.
Oh, okay.
But here, I don't think the PennEast pipeline of piping gas from Pennsylvania into New Jersey for export is going to have any impact at all on the price of gas.
So the homeowners' prices of gas are not going to be lower if this were completed in 2017. The jobs that they're claiming the people who are suffering will be able to have access to are not necessarily, at least in the history of the PennEast Pipeline, ever happened. Now let's talk about the regulations that they claim they're following. Environmentally, you've already brought that up. We'll talk about that a little bit more. What about their regulation? Who regulates them?
Well, they do get regulated, and they can still follow the environmental regulations and still create harm. They can go through wetlands and get approval for that, but that doesn't mean it's not going to cause harm. You can get a permit and approvals to take down a whole bunch of trees. That doesn't mean it doesn't cause any harm. So yes, they can get approval for their route, clear-cut trees, maybe replace some of them, and say, I followed all the environmental rules. That doesn't mean they're not causing harm to the environment. Those are two separate things.
But I thought that's what the Environmental Protection Agency is for, is to protect the environment and create regulation that doesn't disturb the environment.
It's always a balancing act. So you have, when you come forward with approvals for any project, you have environmental people looking to protect the environment, say don't build anywhere, keep it pristine. And then on the other side, you may have builders saying we want to build everywhere. The government and a lot of these regulatory agencies have to do a balancing act of what's in the best interest of the public. And that's what's going on down in Washington right now is FERC, as it knows,
Federal Energy Regulation Commission
has to decide whether this is in the best interest of the people of New Jersey and the public in general to give what's called a certificate of need. Is this good? Have they proven the case that this is necessary? Is this pipeline necessary? Well, if you look at the overall capacity and where this is going...
You mean there's a lot of pipelines already in place?
There's a lot of pipelines already in place on one hand, and you say we're going through Hunterdon and Mercer County that are really still have a lot of farmland preserved areas, a lot of wetlands.
Well, let's speak
you
to
have
that.
You have to balance that.
I mean, I'm just interested in we won't take too long with this, but the preservation of farmland. You get less for your land, and you know that going forward, generations will be protected. No one will be able to develop your farmland. So PennEast comes in and puts pipelines that, according to my other guests, you can't have your animals on because there has to be a right to get in, it has to be easement. You destroy a lot of farming potential because of the heavy equipment. You pollute potentially the water because of the release of rock that can turn arsenic into the water system. So what kind of protection is that farmland preservation. Isn't that a legal document that you sign saying my land is protected?
And that's where the power of eminent domain comes in, which once they have that power, they're entitled to take the property, including all the rights that are there, the owner, a mortgage, an easement. When they come in and use the power of eminent domain to put a pipeline in, they have to pay damages, which we could talk about later.
I want to speak to power of, because I know you really know your stuff with the power of eminent domain. So explain to the viewers very simply, what does that mean in terms of the pipeline's rights to the power of eminent domain?
So under federal law, if the FERC provides a certificate of need, in essence, approves the pipeline, that gives the pipeline company the power of eminent domain. Now, eminent domain is in the United States Constitution. I think most people are generally aware of the government can come in and take property to build a school, to build a road, to build a park, and the majority of people understand why we need that.
Well, the reason is it's for the public use.
It's for the public use.
Right.
Here, you say to yourself, well, the public may not even be using this. And
it's going to Europe, isn't it?
Part of this,
the gas is going somewhere else.
Yeah, the majority of people believe it's going to be almost all exported.
So how
PennEast hasn't conceded that, because as you put a pipeline through an area, you can have all different connections to go to different areas. So sometimes you'll have a pipeline and they could branch off to go to another area, and potentially that can happen. As of now, I don't believe that's the case. But with the power of eminent domain, the Supreme Court over the years has watered that down to a public benefit. And you also have certain federal laws that will give the power of eminent domain to a private company like PennEast for the better good of society. So right now, people are challenging the pipeline, saying, not a lot of jobs, you're already overbuilt, it's not going to lower the prices, you're doing it for export. What's the public good?
And it's going to pollute our land.
On this side, what's the great benefit to the public to enable you to use the power of eminent domain? That's a very strong power. You're taking people's property. You're invading their space. And people get very emotional, and it's important, even if they have to pay. Just because they pay doesn't mean they should be able to do it. So PennEast will have to pay you if they take your property. So if they say, I want to put a pipeline in your backyard, they have to acquire an easement, and they have to pay you for that. Now, if they go through preserved farmland, they're going to say, well, that's not very valuable. You can't build on that. That's cheap property. So I'm going to put it right through this preserved farm because that's cheap.
Wow.
And you have preserved property right now out in Hunter and Mercer County where they are going through, and that's a big problem.
So this just compensation, is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
So the just compensation is determined by the pipeline.
Well, they will make an offer, and then you have a right to challenge that. So the PennEast would come in, and let's assume it's going to be in the back part of your property, and they're going to run a pipeline through the back part. They're going to say, well, we're going to acquire an easement, which gives us the right to put it in, and we think it's worth $10,000. And
because they're just paying you for that portion of your property.
Well, they say then there's no, and it doesn't decrease the value of your home. Because once it's in and I plant the grass, it has no impact on your house. No one really cares.
Do real estate agents agree with that?
No, real estate agents don't agree with that.
Oh.
Now, the pipeline company will say, well, I'm going to show you homes, one home with a pipeline in the backyard, one home across the street with no pipeline, and I'll show that they sell for the same price because that pipeline's been in the ground 30 years and no one even knows it's there. That'll be their evidence. If you were to try to sell your home with the pipeline coming through or your backyard dug up, that's a huge problem. Because if you were going to go buy a home and you had children and you drive up and you see all these signs and a pipeline's going in the backyard and you're not sure exactly how close to the house it's going to be.
How close is it allowed to be?
It could be as close as it wants to be. There's no restrictions. So we've represented clients of pipeline cases where they're very close and sometimes very far away. It depends on the route.
Wow.
And that's very problematic.
Well, what happens if there's a leak in this pipeline?
Well,
and someone lights a cigarette?
You have a problem. We have had gas explosions. We had
Edison, 1994.
Edison is a big one. And they're,
And that's death. for those living in the house.
Yes.
So that's why I mentioned human lives are a big part of this.
It's the problem is when you go forward, they don't pay for a fear factor. They don't pay for any of those emotional issues. It's what can you prove in a court of law. So if they make you an offer for $10,000, you do not have to take that. Then they have to file a complaint to use the power of eminent domain to take it, and you have an opportunity to present your side of the case. And that's really what we do. We do a lot of, we either challenge the taking or we'll present the case either to a judge or a jury, and we'll put our own expert on and prove our own case
Well,
of why there is
Let
damages.
me ask you this about a strategy. Property owners that are watching and that are in this area and afraid that the pipeline is coming through their property. You said the first thing they do is, I think, they do surveys.
Yes.
So do you just say, come on in and do the survey, but I'm against you? Or do you have any right to say you can't come on my property?
Yes, this is your private property.
But I thought it was federally backed. So.
They have to go to court and get an order. So if they come on, if they don't have a court order, if they don't produce a court order for you, to you, they have absolutely no right to step on your
you
property
guys hearing this?
under any circumstance.
This is the attorney speaking here.
Now
Take your pitchforks and stand there and say, no, you're not allowed.
You could also send them a letter saying, in case you anticipate on asking for my approval, the answer is no, stay off my property.
You can send them a letter ahead of time.
To say no. Now, normally they'll come on and ask you to sign an agreement. You can say no. If you show up and there's somebody in your backyard serving, you call the police like any other private property owner would do and say, I have a trespasser, please come out.
Wow.
If you come home and you find stakes or anything else without your approval, call the police and report the trespass.
What if they fly overhead in airplanes?
That's more problematic.
Don't they do that to take
They
pictures?
do. So what happens is about 70% of the people have said, stay off my property, you can't survey. And what that means is that PennEast is having a problem completing their application down at FERC. They don't have complete environmental studies. They don't have complete surveys. So what they could do is they can stand in the public area, look at your property. They'll use Google Maps. They'll use all sorts of different things. But they have been flying helicopters.
Drones?
They can use drones if they wanted to. I haven't heard that. But they have had helicopters hovering over property while they're trying to do fly-in helicopters.
Drones?
They can use drones if they wanted to. I haven't heard that. But they have had helicopters hovering over property while they're trying to do surveys from the air. Now, they may have approval. That may be public areas, but that doesn't mean it's not a nuisance. So you can have a right to fly a plane, but that doesn't mean you can fly it low back and forth over your neighbor's property 24 hours a day.
Is there a law that says you can't do that?
Well, it's the legal theory is a nuisance. So you may
use
have
that word. It's a nuisance.
It's a nuisance, but it has to rise to a certain level. So if a plane flies by, that's not a nuisance. Plane flies by 4 times a day. I don't know. Plane flies by back and forth for 6 hours a day and at 2 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the morning. Yes, that can rise to a level of a nuisance.
What other recourse, or what other suggestions do you make for someone to stop the paperwork from being filed with FERC?
So, well, first you had mentioned Halt. Those, if people band together and pool their resources and pool their knowledge and act together, I think that's probably the best strategy. Many of these towns that are against it simply don't have the funds. They can't go out and say, we're going to bond for $1 million and hire a whole bunch of experts to challenge it. They don't have the resources.
And Halt is homeowners against
land taking.
Land
PennEast.
taking.
Yes.
Okay.
And they've organized.
It's Halt PennEast.
Yes.
.org. Yeah.
And they're, and I'm active with them.
Good.
And I do think it's a very good group. There are other groups out there that are also active. A lot of environmental groups, Riverkeeper, individuals. You can go on to many townships' websites. I've been very impressed with Hopewell, with Delaware Township, with Kingwood. A lot of these municipalities have done a very good job of trying to assemble information and educate their people on what they can do. Because oftentimes people think if the municipality passes a resolution saying we're against it, that they're going to go in and affirmatively fight. PennEast does this for a living. They know what they're doing. They have their hired guns, and they go down to FERC and try to put on a very good case. That means on the property owner side, They need very good people to put on a very good case, and they need to pool their resources.
Tim, I'm really interested. You're saying there is a possibility of stopping this pipeline.
FERC has approved every pipeline up to now. Sooner or later, they're going to have to throw the property owners a win. And I think this is one of those cases because it's going through a lot of protected areas. It's going under the Delaware River, preserved farms, wetlands, woodlands. For what reason? And if they are going to, listen, if oil prices were high and this was going to service Hunterdon, Warren, Mercer County, they really need it and people are struggling economically, you might scratch your head and say, well, okay, maybe I disagree, but I sort of get it. Here, you're plowing through a pipeline, which what we all believe is to export an environmentally sensitive area. Why? Do we need it?
And there's an abundance of pipelines that are already in place.
There's a lot of pipelines.
They argue the 30 years of pipelines. And isn't it also true that gas was really thought of as better than coal, but not the solution? And it keeps environmental point of view is that as long as you stay away from alternative energy, it's going to be expensive. And until you throw yourself into it, like other countries are doing in Denmark and Norway, that you're not going to ever put the energy into really, really safer energy. And gas was that transition between coal and maybe solar and...
We're in tough times right now as we come up to a presidential election on how forcibly we put these laws in place. When oil and gas prices are down, people start, especially gas prices, people go out and buy the big cars. If it's $5 a gallon, we will have small cars. If it's $1.50 a gallon, everybody's buying big cars. And I think our behavior, unfortunately...
Are we buying big cars again?
Some of the SUVs are back as the price dropped. And, people should be able to make their own decisions. But until, I have 3 young children, and they've grown up with recycling. That's a way of life for them. They're used to it. Right. People in my generation had to go through that transition. For them, it's bad to throw recycling into the garbage. Right. Versus an older person like myself, and it's lazy. They help train us. But until we can get the mindset of why this is important, I think a lot of people are going to be driven financially. Oh, it doesn't hurt me, therefore I'm okay. If it costs me $5 a gallon, I'm going to go find a car that gets 40 miles per gallon. If it's $1.50, 19, I got my SUV. And I think people need to be educated, need to be committed. But I agree with you that as we continue to make the fossil fuels available for everybody, there's less of an incentive to really get in there and make the hard cuts. Maybe it's going to cost us more money, but in the long run, it's a better move. And I think that's a tough balance. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm wanting to, we're going to have to close soon, and I think what I wanted you to be able to tell the viewers is this a fight that, you said earlier, it is a fight that maybe we can stop, that maybe the government has approved too many pipelines. FERC has approved too many pipelines. What are the chances of this pipeline being halted, being stopped altogether?
I would say it's still a long shot, but people can't assume someone else is going to fight that fight. They have to get involved. They have to join in. A lot of times people might hear a lawsuit's filed, or they might hear an objection was filed and leave it at that. Or they may go to a meeting. I was in a meeting in Kingwood, and people got up and spoke. And one of the most important things I think that came out of that meeting is you could go to a meeting and you can vent and you can say how bad it is, but you just can't go home and get on with your life. You have to get active. And you get active in a variety of ways that you could be supported.
Give some suggestions. Speak to the camera and tell
Sure,
them what
I think, well, first, in order for the fights to really be productive, these organizations need to be funded. So it's very important that you donate what you can. And I know Halt has raised some money, but they need more to really put the fight on. Oftentimes you need experts. You need environmental people. You need lawyers to get down there. Second, reach out to your congresspeople, your senators and your congressmen, and let them know where you stand.
That you don't need this.
Yeah,
that
you don't need it. You don't want. Nobody wants it, but you really have to remind them of where they're going. A lot of preserved, environmentally protected area. That's very important.
And that we don't need more pipelines.
And that we don't need more pipelines.
In fact, we don't, right?
Well,
we have enough.
That's the fight down in FERC. FERC says no. Jobs, we need it. Lower prices, all these wonderful things. On the opposite side, they're saying that's not true. We don't need it. And if we don't need it, why are you going to allow the power of eminent domain, you're taking people's property.
Yeah.
It's a very serious thing. Short of a search by the police, probably the most intrusive thing the government can do to you.
Well,
Take
I
your
would
property.
wonder why that legal argument itself isn't the most impactful. That it's supposed to be for public use. And this is if somebody could prove this gas was being exported to Europe and it wasn't even being used for public use and no one wanted it and gas prices are fine where they are, then what would they have to prove eminent domain?
That's the fight that's happening down in FERC.
Yeah.
And down at FERC, once they give that certificate of need, it's not totally over,
right,
but it's almost over because now they have the power of eminent domain, which means they can build. In order to challenge that, you need very good people that know what they're doing to lay out a case. This is not the case. It's not the jobs in the area. There's not a necessity. It's
right,
not in the public benefit.
Right.
Therefore, don't approve it, because with that approval comes the power of eminent domain. And I support the power of eminent domain for the
public
project.
use, yeah.
Public
schools and highways and things that we
and
need.
Roads, even certain cities that
Right.
Rehabilitation zones where they come in and try to get parts of a city going in a
Right.
public-private partnership. Those are all very good, useful powers,
Right.
but they can't be abused.
Now I'm going to have to stop. We've run out of time. And I really appreciate you coming on the show. So I think everyone knows now a little bit more about the legal aspects of this pipeline fight. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
This is another show of Pathways. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Massive flames reaching into the sky, shaking a Pennsylvania community to its core.
Flared a loud broom, field on fire.
Just look, a blaze so powerful, it literally melted nearby homes.
When I come around the bend, it looked like you were looking down into hell.
Tonight, police say a natural gas explosion in a pipeline sparked it all this morning, creating a massive ball of fire that to some felt like an earthquake. Take a look. Before, a green field with a home nestled among trees. Now the trees are bare sticks and the house is rubble.
We could feel the heat from our house, and we live a mile down this road.
One man was seriously burned when he tried running away from the fire. He's in the hospital tonight and told police the fireball sounded more like a tornado.